I never believed a voice could reach across decades, not until I heard it calling through the fog. People think train stations are quiet after midnight, but they're not. They breathe, they hum. Every metal beam, every wire, holds echoes of people who passed through long before you. And if you listen long enough, sometimes the echoes answer. It began on a night I shouldn't have been there. I'd missed the last train out of town, the only connection that could have gotten me home before dawn. The attendant had locked up and left. The station lights stayed on, but dim, as if even they were tired of keeping watch. I remember checking my phone. No signal. The air was heavy with mist, the kind that dulls color and sound. There was a small radio on the wall beside the timetable. One of those old models they never removed, still wired into the station system. It had no reason to be working. Yet as I stood there in the silence, a faint sound came from it. Static, soft and constant, like distant breathing. Then under it, a low voice. At first I thought it was a transmission from a nearby depot, but there are no depots that close to this stretch. The line had been decommissioned years ago. I stepped closer. The voice was calm, formal, the tone dispatchers used in the old days. Words came in bursts between static. Pulling in at platform 2, last call signal, confirm arrival. I looked toward the tracks. The fog was thick enough to erase everything beyond a few feet, but somewhere inside it, a faint orange glow flickered, like a lantern swinging gently. I called out. Nothing. The voice on the radio repeated the same line, softer this time, as if drifting away. Then silence again. You know that moment when logic tries to catch up to fear? That's what I felt. My brain trying to explain the impossible. Maybe someone was testing an old line. Maybe it was interference. I wanted to believe that. But then the clock above me ticked once, even though it hadn't moved all night. So I waited, half because I wanted to see who was coming, half because something in that voice sounded familiar. Minutes passed. The fog shifted, and then I heard it. The low moan of an approaching train, slow, steady, echoing from far beyond the curve. But there was no vibration underfoot, no movement in the rails. Only the sound getting louder, closer, until it seemed to press against the air around me. Then it stopped. A stillness followed, so complete I could hear my own pulse. I turned back toward the station doors, and the radio crackled again. This time, the voice wasn't distant. It was right there in the room with me. Passenger confirmed, one waiting. The temperature dropped instantly. I could see my breath drift out in front of me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, started from the direction of the tracks. I told myself it was someone playing a prank, maybe a late worker, maybe another traveler. But the steps didn't sound like boots or shoes. They sounded hollow, like weight moving on wood that shouldn't exist. When the fog parted just enough, I saw the glow again. Not a lantern, a signal light, the old kind used before electronic boards. It swayed gently from an invisible wire, and beneath it, a man in a conductor's coat stood facing the empty tracks. I tried to call out, but my throat tightened. Something about his stillness felt wrong, too exact, too careful. When he turned his head, I realized there was no light in his eyes, just the reflection of the signal lamp burning there. He lifted one hand slowly and adjusted the brim of his hat, then pointed down the line. I followed his gesture and saw the outline of a train, faint, colorless, waiting in the fog. The windows glowed but dimly, like memories of light rather than light itself. My legs carried me closer before my mind caught up. The air smelled of wet dust and burnt wires. I stopped at the edge of the platform, heart pounding. The train made no sound, no hiss, no vibration, just presence. Then the radio behind me spoke again. Boarding complete. Departure imminent. The conductor looked at me. His lips didn't move, but I heard him whisper. Or maybe the fog whispered for him. You missed your last call, but we kept the signal for you. I stepped back. Every instinct screamed to run, but curiosity pinned me where I stood. I wanted to understand, to ask what he meant. But then I saw the door nearest to me slide open. Inside, rows of passengers sat in silence, heads turned toward the windows. Their faces, barely faces at all. Some seemed half faded, like smoke frozen in shape. Others were clear, too clear, their eyes wide open, reflecting a world that wasn't there. The first thought that hit me was recognition. I knew one of them, the man near the window. I'd seen him in a news article years ago, a commuter who vanished after a derailment near this very line. I stumbled backward, gasping, the fog curling around my legs. The conductor stepped closer, tilting his head slightly as if curious about my reaction. Then without sound, he reached out his hand, palm up, offering something. It was an old signal key, rusted and cold, with a tag attached that read, "Last call, return line." When I didn't take it, he closed his hand slowly and turned back toward the train. The door slid shut behind him, and one by one, the windows went dark. Only the faint light from the signal remained, pulsing gently. The whistle came next, low, distant, drawn out. But this time it didn't echo away. It sank into the ground, into my bones, into the quiet. The air trembled once, and then the fog folded in on itself. The train was gone. I stood there alone on the platform, surrounded by nothing but mist and the static of that old radio. The clock above me ticked again, once, and stopped. 11:59. I picked up my bag and ran to the exit, but the gate was locked. When I turned around, the radio spoke again, the same calm dispatcher tone, only softer. "Signal clear, line open, await next arrival." I left it behind. I didn't even look back as I forced the side door open and stepped out into the empty street. The fog followed me halfway home that night, thinning only when the first light of dawn touched the pavement. For weeks, I couldn't shake the sound of that voice. I'd hear faint static on my phone when the weather turned, or the echo of that whistle when fog rolled in near the river. Once I even thought I heard the same phrase in a dream. "Passenger confirmed. One waiting." I stopped taking trains for a while, but curiosity has a way of circling back, doesn't it? A few months later, I visited that station again. It had been closed for renovations. The staff told me the old signal system had been disconnected years ago. There was no radio in the main hall anymore. I walked to the platform. Everything looked normal. Clean, new lights, fresh paint. But under the bench where I'd waited that night, something caught the light. I bent down. It was the same key, rusted, cold, the tag still attached. "Last call, return line." I left it there. I didn't touch it. I told myself it must have been someone's prank, but I could feel it. That faint pulse in the air, the same rhythm as the signal that night. I hear it still sometimes. Usually when I'm alone, when the world goes quiet enough for old sounds to find their way back. A whisper beneath the noise, a hum just below hearing range. And every time it comes, I stop what I'm doing, because I know what it means. It means the line is open again. If you ever find yourself waiting for a late train and you hear a voice calling "last call signal" through the static, don't answer. Don't move closer, because that signal isn't meant for the living anymore. And once it finds you, it doesn't forget. You ever wait for a train that never comes? Not late, not canceled, just never comes. I thought I understood what waiting meant until that night. That platform, it changed how I see time itself. It started on a Thursday. I just missed my connection after a conference in a nearby town. My phone had died halfway through the day, and I figured I'd catch the last train home, a small regional line that ran through the fog-drenched hills. The station was nearly empty when I arrived. The kind of place where sound doesn't travel right. You can hear the clack of your shoes echo longer than they should. You know that strange silence after 11 p.m., where even your own breathing feels too loud. That's what it was like. There was one bench under a flickering lamp. I sat there shivering, watching the fog roll in so thick it swallowed the tracks whole. Then came the announcement, a voice from the intercom, barely above a whisper. "Next service, arriving shortly on platform 3. Only there wasn't a platform 3, there were only 2. I remember checking the map above the ticket counter, tracing it with my finger, thinking maybe I'd misread it. But no, just platforms 1 and 2. Still, curiosity is a dangerous thing when you're tired and alone. I walked toward where platform 3 should have been. The further I went, the colder it got. Not sharp cold, the kind that makes you want to move, but a deep, still cold, like the air was holding its breath. Then I saw it, a narrow staircase leading down, half buried under moss and time. No sign, no lights, just darkness leading underground. I should have turned back. I should have waited where it was safe under the lamp. But I told myself, just a quick look. Maybe it was an old service tunnel. When I reached the bottom, I heard the rails, the faint metallic hum of a train line, alive beneath my feet. And then, the announcement again. Train approaching, platform 3. I stood there staring into the fog as headlights began to cut through the mist. A pair of glowing circles, gliding slow and steady, but they didn't flicker like normal lights. They shimmered, almost like reflections in water. The train stopped before me, silent. No hiss of brakes, no clatter of wheels, just quiet. The doors opened. No one inside. The seats were upholstered in a fabric I'd never seen before. Green, faded, patterned with vines that seemed to move when I looked away. A soft mist drifted through the carriage. I should have run, but something about it, the emptiness, the strange familiarity, pulled me in. When I sat down, the train started moving, smooth as breath. I don't remember the sound of it accelerating, just that it was moving, and I was watching the fog outside blur by in streaks of pale gray. No signs, no passing towns, no sense of direction. I tried to find my phone, dead still. My watch had stopped. Minutes, hours. They all began to feel the same. Then through the fog, I saw another passenger, sitting a few rows ahead. Still, facing forward. I couldn't see their face. Their coat was old-fashioned, long, dark, worn at the edges. I remember thinking, thank God I'm not alone. I called out. My voice sounded too soft, like the air was swallowing it. No response. Then the train slowed. The lights inside dimmed, flickering once, twice, before steadying again. The passenger stood up, turned. Their face was blurred, not covered, blurred, like a smudge on glass. And yet, I could tell they were looking directly at me. They raised their hand and pointed toward the window. I followed the gesture. Outside, through the fog, I saw a faint glow. A station, dimly lit. A sign, platform 3. The train came to a halt. The doors opened. The figure stepped out. I followed, stepping into the mist. The air was thicker now, heavier. The station was silent, the lamps along the platform dim and flickering. I turned back to the train, but it was gone. No sound, no tracks, just empty space. And then I noticed something else. There were people on the platform, dozens of them, all standing perfectly still. Men, women, children, dressed in clothes from every decade you can imagine. 1920s hats, 1960s coats, even a modern hoodie here and there, all staring down the tracks, waiting. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but no one moved. It was as if time had folded here. All these travelers from different eras, frozen in the same endless wait. The intercom crackled again. Next service, arriving shortly on platform 3. Every head turned slightly toward the voice, in unison. That was when I realized something. Some of the faces looked familiar. One of them looked like me, older, thinner, eyes hollow, but definitely me. And when the voice called again, train approaching, I saw him, me, step forward. He smiled at me as the fog rolled in and whispered, "It's almost time." That's when I ran. I ran through the mist, toward where I thought the stairs were, but every direction looked the same. Each step echoed as if on metal. Then faintly behind me, the train again. The same shimmering headlights sliding through the fog. I turned to see who was boarding and saw everyone vanish, just gone. When I came to, I was sitting on the same bench under the same lamp at the surface station. My phone buzzed to life, showing 6:12 a.m. The morning train was pulling in. Only one problem. When I looked up at the arrivals board, there it was again. Platform 3, scheduled. 12:47 a.m., the time I'd arrived last night. I've gone back twice since then. Daylight, crowds, everything normal. But each time I check the schedule board, Platform 3 is still listed, always for 12:47 a.m. Always the same destination, the eternal platform. I don't wait for it anymore. I can't. But sometimes when I pass that station after dark, I hear the announcement faintly through the fog. Next service, arriving shortly on Platform 3. And when I look across the tracks, I swear I see myself still standing there, waiting. If you'd been there that night, would you have stepped onto that train? Or would you still be waiting with the rest of them for the next call? I've never told anyone this before. Not completely, not the way it really happened. Because when I start talking about it, people either laugh or they just stare, waiting for me to say I'm joking. I wish I was, but what I saw that night wasn't a trick of the fog or a dream. It was something that has followed me ever since. And if you've ever waited alone for a late train, you might understand why I don't wait on platforms anymore. It started on a night I shouldn't even have been traveling. I'd missed my connection hours earlier because of a delay, and I was desperate to get home. The clerk at the ticket window told me there was one more train, an old service that sometimes passed through after midnight. He didn't sound sure of it himself. He just said, "If you're lucky, you'll catch the Pullman 47. Then he smiled in that tired way people do when they just want to end a conversation. The station was nearly empty by then. One lamp was flickering above the bench, and everything else was swallowed by fog. The air felt heavy, like the world had gone quiet just to see what I would do next. The clock above the platform was frozen at 11:47. I remember that because I checked my phone, and it said 12:03. Still, I could swear I heard the ticking. It's strange how something can be broken, yet still make you feel like it's keeping time with your heartbeat. I sat there for what must have been 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. Every sound was distant, the echo of my own shoes when I paced, the hiss of the fog as it crept closer. Then without warning, I heard it, a faint whistle somewhere down the line. I stood up, no light, no shape, just that low, drawn-out sound that felt like it had come from another decade. I waited, eyes fixed on the darkness, expecting to see the glow of a headlamp break through, but nothing came, just more fog, moving like breath across the tracks. When the vibration finally reached the soles of my shoes, I froze. It wasn't the heavy rumble of an approaching engine. It was light, steady, almost like something gliding. The rails began to shimmer under the station lamps, and out of the mist came the outline of a train. No sound of an engine, no sparks, just movement. It came to a stop so smoothly that I thought it had simply materialized there. The carriages were long and old-fashioned, their paint faded and streaked as if time had been gnawing at them. The windows glowed faintly from inside, but the light didn't spill out. It stayed trapped, like it belonged to another world. The doors slid open with a sigh. I told myself it had to be some kind of restoration service, maybe a historical line or a film set. But there was no crew, no noise, no sign of life except for the faint hum of the lights inside. I don't even remember deciding to step forward. I just remember the moment my foot crossed that gap between platform and carriage and how the air changed. Thicker, colder, almost metallic. Inside, everything was perfectly still. Velvet seats, wooden panels polished to a dull sheen, small lamps glowing at each booth. It smelled faintly of oil and something older, like books left in the rain. A few passengers sat scattered through the carriage, dressed neatly, reading newspapers or staring ahead. No one looked up as I walked past. Then something caught my eye. The man sitting across from me folded his paper, and for a second I saw the headline, "Pullman 47 derails, 37 dead." The date was August 12th, 1963. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a prop or an old collector's edition, but when I looked again, the ink had smudged, as if the words didn't want to stay still. I tried to steady my breath. Maybe this was some kind of themed train experience, something touristy I hadn't heard about. But then I noticed their clothes. The passengers weren't just old-fashioned. They were damp, as though they'd stepped out of a storm that hadn't touched this town in years. A woman across the aisle turned a page, and her hand left a faint trail of water droplets on the table. I wanted to leave, but curiosity pinned me there. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, not direct, but constant, like the room itself was aware of me. The train started to move, but I didn't feel the motion. The world outside remained fog, the same shade of gray, endless and still. A shadow passed down the aisle. I thought it was the conductor, though I hadn't heard any footsteps. When he stopped beside me, I didn't look up right away. His voice was quiet when he said my name, my full name. I don't remember giving it to anyone at the station. When I looked up, his face was hidden beneath the brim of his cap. He held out a ticket, old paper, creased in yellow. I took it. My hand trembled. The surface was blank at first, then slowly, the letters began to form.
Return only.
I tried to ask him what that meant, but my throat was dry. He tilted his head slightly, almost like he was studying me, and said, "You're early." Then he moved on, and one by one, the passengers began to disappear. Not stand up, vanish. The seats they'd occupied faded into dust outlines, the air filling with the scent of wet earth. I stood, tried to call out, but my voice didn't carry. I turned toward the window. Outside, shapes were moving in the fog. Figures walking along the tracks, some carrying suitcases, some just drifting. Their outlines flickered, almost like reflections. But when I leaned closer, I realized the faces I saw were my own. Not copies exactly, more like echoes, slightly different, slightly wrong, but all of them looking back at me. Every door I tried led to the same carriage. I moved through 5, maybe 6 compartments, each identical, each with the same ticking clock stuck at 11:47. I began to lose track of how long I'd been there. The hum in the walls felt like breathing. I could hear faint voices, layered and distant, whispering over each other in fragments of conversations. Names, apologies, please. Then I saw it, a small plaque fixed above my seat. The metal was rusted, but the engraving was clear. In memory of those lost aboard Pullman 47, and below that, scratched in uneven lines, were my initials. I don't know how long I stared at it before everything went dark. One moment the lamps flickered, the next, I was standing on the platform again, the fog thinning around me. The sky was gray with morning. The train was gone. The rails were cold. And yet, when I looked down, the old ticket was still in my hand. The words "return only" barely visible anymore. I found a newspaper on the bench beside me. It was soaked and falling apart, but one headline remained. Anniversary of Pullman, 47th disaster, 37 remembered. The date on it was that day, the same day I had boarded. Since that night, I've heard the whistle more than once. Never close, always distant. Sometimes it's on a night drive. Sometimes when fog rolls over the river near my house. I tell myself it's just coincidence, some echo carried by the wind. But I know the sound, and each time it comes, it stops at the same note, the same pitch, like it's waiting. If you ever find yourself alone at a train station past midnight and you hear a whistle but see no light, don't wait for it to come closer. Don't try to see what's arriving. Just turn around, walk away, and keep walking until the sound fades. Because if you don't, it might remember your name too. Tell me, if you were there that night, would you have stepped onto the train? You ever hear something you can't explain? A sound that doesn't belong to the moment you're living in? That's how it began for me. A night of missed trains and heavy fog, and the faint sound of rails humming beneath my feet long after the last departure had left the station. It began on an ordinary night. I wasn't chasing anything unusual, Just the last train home after a long day that had dragged far past its limit. The air was thick, damp, heavy with fog that clung to everything. You could taste the metal of it. I'd finished work late that evening. The city was quiet in that tired way it gets after midnight, where even the streetlights look like they're nodding off. I was supposed to catch the last train home, but when I reached the platform, the clock had already passed the final schedule. The ticket clerk had closed up. The lights were dimmed. It was just me, the fog, and the long, empty stretch of track disappearing into the white. You know how train stations sound when they're still alive? The low murmur of travelers, the scrape of shoes, the distant chime before an announcement. But when they're empty, there's a different kind of sound. One that's not silence exactly, more like the echo of silence trying to fill itself. I sat down on a cold metal bench, thinking maybe I'd wait a bit before finding a taxi. That's when I heard it, a faint metallic ring, like steel wheels meeting steel rails somewhere far off. Rhythmic, steady, a train in motion. I looked down the track. Nothing, just fog thick enough to swallow the signals. Then came the voice. Low at first, distorted. A conductor's call maybe, but distant. Stretched thin like it was traveling through time instead of air. It echoed across the platform. Words I couldn't make out, but they sounded routine, like a real announcement from years ago. I told myself it had to be some kind of sound bouncing off the tunnels or nearby hills, but the rails beneath my feet started to vibrate, softly, just enough that I felt it through the bench. You ever sit perfectly still and feel the world move under you? It's like something ancient stirring below the surface. Then, the whistle. A clear, old-fashioned train whistle. The kind you don't hear anymore. It was close. I stood up and stepped toward the edge of the platform. I couldn't see a thing beyond 3 feet in front of me, but the sound, it was right there. The rhythmic clack of wheels, the steady build of motion, the long exhale of a heavy engine slowing to a stop. And then, the sound cut, completely. No brakes, no final hiss. Just silence again, as if the whole thing had been imagined. Only I could still feel the tremor in the rails. I leaned closer to look down at the track. That's when I saw the reflection. Not light exactly, but movement. Faint, like shadows pacing. I thought someone was walking down there, but the steps didn't match any rhythm I knew. Too slow, too uneven, and they echoed wrong. Each one came half a second after the last, as though something was walking in a world just slightly out of sync with ours. Then the voice again, clearer now. All aboard. I froze. It came from behind me, but when I turned, there was no one on the platform. The benches were empty. The fog hung heavy, pressing down so thick it muffled my own breath. I tried calling out, "Hello?" My voice felt swallowed. No echo came back, and yet another one did. Not mine. It repeated the same word. "Hello!" Only half a second after me, fainter, warped, like an old recording. Then a pause and laughter. Soft, uneven, like it came from inside a tunnel. I backed away from the edge, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was some trick of acoustics, an echo bouncing back off the fog. But fog doesn't echo, not like that. The sound came again, this time the shuffle of shoes on gravel, slow, deliberate, growing closer. I turned expecting someone to emerge from the mist, maybe another traveler, someone who'd missed their train like me. But the steps stopped halfway down the platform and stayed there. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the weight of presence, that pressure on your skin when someone's standing too close behind you. Then, a whisper. You ever have a whisper slide so close to your ear that your body reacts before your mind can process it? I flinched, but it didn't stop. "Track's clear now," it said. The voice was male, familiar in the way a memory is, something you can't place but know you've heard before. And then faintly, from down the rail, the hum of another train. This one softer, slower, a tired rhythm, like something mechanical but worn out. It got closer, but no light came with it, just sound. The empty air in front of me began to pulse with the vibrations. Each passing second made my chest tighten, my stomach twist. I don't know how long I stood there before realizing that the echoes, they weren't moving past. They were circling, the same sounds repeating, looping in perfect intervals. Train whistle, brakes, voice, footsteps, silence, over and over. And then, one loop changed. The voice that called, "All aboard," sounded closer, stronger, and followed by something else. A second voice, my own, repeating it. "All aboard." It came out of the fog, almost casual. Same tone, same inflection. That's when I started to run. Every step I took echoed too, but offbeat, like the rails themselves were mocking my rhythm. I didn't look back, not once. When I reached the end of the platform, the sound stopped again. Cut clean, mid-breath. No wind, no hum, nothing. Just my heartbeat echoing against the fog. I climbed the stairs, made it to the empty street, and found the lights of a single taxi waiting near the station gate. The driver looked half asleep, but when I told him I'd been down by the tracks, his expression changed. He didn't speak. Just shook his head once and muttered, "They don't stop there anymore." "What do you mean, R?" I asked. He looked straight ahead. "They tore up those lines 5 years ago. No one goes down there." He drove me home without another word. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The faint hum of metal, the faraway whistle, and under it all, a voice repeating my own words back to me. I tried ignoring it. I tried forgetting it. But it's been months now, and sometimes when the fog rolls in thick enough, the echoes start again. Always at the edge of hearing, always the same pattern. Train whistle, brakes, voice, footsteps, silence. And then, every so often, just before the silence, I hear my own voice again. "All aboard." You might think that's just an echo, some leftover sound trapped between steel and fog, but I know what I heard that night. And sometimes when I walk by the old station after dark, I see faint lights on the rails, flickering where no track remains. Maybe they're just reflections. Maybe there's something else. But if you ever hear a train when there shouldn't be one, don't go looking for it, because the rails remember. They carry every sound that's ever passed over them. Every whistle, every scream, every last goodbye. And if you listen long enough, they start to echo back. Only louder, closer, like they found your frequency. And one night, when you hear that whisper telling you to step forward, you'll understand what I mean. The trains don't stop there anymore, but their echoes still do. And sometimes they're waiting for someone to answer back.